Mom said it as a joke, her glass-raised voice sweet and sharp at the same time. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even miss you. Laughter exploded around the table. 20 people all pretending it was funny. The string lights above us flickered, catching the condensation on my untouched glass. I didn't laugh. I didn't move. I just watched my mother's smile stretch wider, waiting for someone, anyone to stop her. No one did. The air smelled like grilled chicken and cheap perfume. Every giggle felt like a pinprick under my skin. So I waited for the laughter to fade, for the night to turn quiet enough to hear my own heartbeat. That was the moment something inside me changed. The Monroe reunion always looked perfect from the outside, the kind of backyard gathering you'd see in a commercial grilled food linen dresses, wine glasses catching the golden hour light. Every summer without fail, Mom would plan it down to the minute. The guest list, the seating chart, even the playlist had her fingerprints all over it. She lived for this day, the one time of year she could prove to everyone, especially herself, that we were still a respectable family. And every year I showed up knowing exactly what role I was supposed to play, the distant daughter, polite but invisible. By the time I arrived that afternoon, the yard was already crowded. Aunt Cara was taking pictures of the food instead of eating it. Uncle Greg was loudly complaining about taxes, and Tyler, my brother, the golden boy, was surrounded by a group of cousins talking about his new job at a startup. I could already hear Mom's laugh cutting through the noise before I saw her. It wasn't real laughter. It was the kind that performed for the audience. "Eva, sweetheart," she said when she spotted me, arms open, smile bright enough to blind. I hugged her out of habit, catching the familiar scent of her expensive perfume, sweet, polished, suffocating. "You made it," she added, as if I'd crashed a party instead of attending the family reunion I'd been invited to since birth. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, "because that's what you say." Mom's eyes flicked over my simple black dress. She gave a faint smile, the kind that said, "You could have tried harder." "Still keeping it minimalist, I see," she murmured. And before I could respond, she was already turning to greet another guest. That was how it always was with her. No full sentences, just passing judgments wrapped in polite smiles. I found a seat at the far end of the table near the kids' section where no one bothered to talk. I could hear bits of conversations floating across the lawn. Cara bragging about her daughter's new car, Greg talking about his boat, Tyler telling someone about the deal he just closed. My father, quiet as always, stood near the grill, turning burgers and nodding at whatever Mom said. It should have been another harmless summer evening. But the tension was there like static before a storm. When I was younger, I used to wonder what I'd done to make her hate me so much. As I got older, I realized hate wasn't the right word. It was control. I was the only person she couldn't mold, the only one who didn't need her approval. And that, in her world, was the ultimate betrayal. At one point, Grandpa Will shuffled in through the side gate, cane tapping softly against the patio stones. His face was lined, but his eyes were sharp, too sharp to miss anything. When he reached me, he gave my hand a quick squeeze and whispered, "You holding up, kid?" I nodded. "You know how she gets." He chuckled low. "Oh, I know. Just remember there's more than one way to win a game." I didn't know what he meant then. Not yet. Dinner stretched on. The sky deepened from orange to a hazy blue. The smell of grilled chicken mixed with garden roses and the faint bitterness of wine. Mom floated from guest to guest, topping off glasses, complimenting outfits, laughing too loud. Her energy filled the space like perfume, pleasant to outsiders, toxic if you stayed too long. When dessert came out, she took her usual spot at the head of the table like a queen surveying her court. I just started to think maybe, just maybe, this year would pass quietly. No barbs, no jokes when she picked up her glass. And then came the line that cracked something open. If Eva disappeared tomorrow, she said, smiling at the crowd, no one would even notice. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then laughter erupted. I could see it travel around the table, the cousins chuckling. Greg nearly spilling his drink, Tyler smirking as if he didn't quite know whether to join in. Even my father gave a weary little chuckle, the sound of a man who'd long stopped trying to intervene. And me, I just sat there. The wine glass in my hand stayed perfectly still, my reflection trembling inside it. Mom's laughter echoed louder, almost triumphant, as if she'd scored a point no one else knew was being tallied. I didn't say a word, didn't move, didn't let my face break. Grandpa Will across the lawn caught my eye. His expression didn't change, but I could see the disappointment not at me, but at her. The moment passed quickly for everyone else. Someone cracked a joke, the conversation drifted, and the evening rolled on as if nothing had happened. But for me, the air had shifted. The sky felt colder, the laughter sharper. That sentence, "if you disappeared tomorrow," kept replaying in my head, looping like a song you hate, but can't stop hearing. It wasn't the first time she'd said something cruel. It was just the first time I finally stopped flinching. By the end of the night, when the last guests left, and Mom was busy collecting compliments about how perfect everything was, I stood alone under the string lights. The plates were half cleared, the music still playing softly. The world had gone quiet enough that I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the open kitchen window. That was when I realized the silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt like something new, something solid. And that meant she'd finally done it. She'd crossed the line I didn't even know I'd drawn. The joke wasn't funny, but it was the last one she'd ever make at my expense. The next morning, sunlight sliced through my blinds, sharp and merciless. I lay there for a while staring at the ceiling, replaying every laugh from the night before. It was almost funny how familiar humiliation had become, how predictable. For years, Mom's cruelty came disguised as comedy. She had a gift for it, weaponizing charm, turning other people's discomfort into her stage. I used to think it was unintentional, that she didn't realize how much those little jokes hurt. But last night, that wasn't thoughtless. That was deliberate. I made coffee, trying to shake off the heaviness in my chest. The kitchen was still littered with the aftermath of the reunion crumbs on the counter, a half-empty wine bottle in the sink, the faint smell of burned sugar from a pie no one finished. It felt like the residue of a performance that had gone on too long. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Grandpa Will. "If you're up, swing by. Bring your coffee. Porch is warm." I stared at it for a few seconds, then grabbed my mug and my keys. Grandpa's house was only 10 minutes away, tucked behind a row of old oaks at the edge of town. He'd lived there my whole life, in a place that smelled like books, pipe smoke, and something I could never quite name, safety maybe. He was already on the porch when I arrived, a blanket over his knees, the morning paper folded beside him. When he saw me, he gave that small, knowing smile of his. "Didn't sleep, huh?" "Barely." I sat beside him. The porch creaked under my weight. He sipped his tea. "She went too far this time. She always goes too far." Maybe he said, watching the wind stir the trees. "But you looked different last night. You didn't bite back. You didn't shrink either. You just watched." I exhaled. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. He nodded slowly. "Good. Because sometimes the best response is to let people reveal who they are without your help." We sat in silence for a while. The air smelled like pine and dew. Somewhere inside, a clock ticked faintly. Finally, he reached into the pocket of his cardigan and pulled out a small envelope. His handwriting looped neatly across the front for Eva. "When she's ready." He held it out. I was going to wait, but after last night, what is this? Something that might even the field a little. Keep it safe. Don't open it yet. Not until you know why you're opening it. I frowned. "You're being cryptic again." He chuckled. "Old habit. Just trust me." That was the thing about Grandpa. He never said more than he needed to, but he also never said anything he didn't mean. I slipped the envelope into my bag. "She'll hate that I was here. She'll hate anything that reminds her she doesn't control you," he said softly. "That's not your problem anymore." When I got home, the silence in my apartment felt different, not empty, focused. My mother's voice still echoed in my head, but now it sounded smaller, almost desperate. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank screen. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt curious. What would happen if I stopped absorbing her cruelty and started documenting it? Instead, I began scrolling through old emails, messages, even family photos. Every smiling picture was a record of something that came with a price, an insult, a guilt trip, a manipulation. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but instinct told me to keep going. Later that day, I stopped by my father's office under the pretense of dropping off some documents. He looked exhausted, tie loosened, eyes red. When I mentioned Mom's joke, he sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "She just gets carried away," he said quietly. "Dad, she humiliated me in front of the entire family." He flinched. "I know. I should have said something. Why didn't you?" He hesitated. "Because it wouldn't have changed anything. She'd only find another way to twist it." That was the saddest part. He wasn't defending her. He was defeated by her. On the drive home, I realized something. Every person in our family played their role perfectly. Mom, the tyrant; Dad, the coward; Tyler, the chosen one; and me, the invisible scapegoat. The only way to break it was to step out of the script completely. That night, I lay awake staring at the envelope on my nightstand. I traced the edges with my fingers, tempted to tear it open. But I could still hear Grandpa's words. "Not until you know why." I didn't know why yet, but I could feel it forming like a storm gathering behind my ribs. A few days passed. The online noise started trickling in Aunt Kara's inspirational Facebook post about forgiveness. Tyler posting a photo of Mom with a caption about family being everything. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. I just watched. Because that was the pattern. She'd humiliate me, they'd rally around her, I'd defend myself, and somehow I'd become the villain. Not this time. Not when silence was finally working in my favor. Then one evening, I got another message, this time from an unknown number. "You should have laughed when you had the chance." No name, no context, just that. I stared at it for a long time, heart hammering, then typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. That's when I checked my apartment door. The lock was fine, but the air felt wrong, like someone had been here breathing the same space. I turned on every light, checked every room, found nothing. But the unease stayed. The next morning, I found my front gate slightly ajar. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe not. That's when I finally opened Grandpa's envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, his signature at the bottom, a legal header at the top, "Last Will and Testament of William Monroe." And underlined near the middle, "I leave my primary estate, including property and accounts, to my granddaughter, Eva Monroe." My breath caught. There was a sticky note attached in Grandpa's handwriting. "She'll hate this. Don't let that stop you." I folded the paper back into the envelope, hands trembling not from fear, but something colder, sharper. I realized what the text had meant. You should have laughed when you had the chance. Because they wouldn't be laughing much longer, and for the first time in my life, that thought didn't scare me. It steadied me. The envelope sat on my desk like a loaded gun. Every time I passed by, my eyes caught the notary stamp, the neat black ink of Grandpa's signature, and the single sentence that would detonate everything my mother built her identity on. I didn't open it again that week. I didn't have to. Just knowing what was inside was enough to change the way I breathed. Mom texted me 2 days later. "Mom, let's move past last weekend, okay? It was just a joke. Me." "Sure." "Mom, good. Family should stick together." "Me, absolutely." I stared at the bubbles on the screen, waiting for her next line, half expecting her to add something like, "You overreacted." But she didn't. That was worse. When Helen Monroe went quiet, it meant she was recalibrating. That silence didn't last long. By Thursday, Aunt Kara had posted a long, self-righteous paragraph on Facebook about certain family members manipulating an elderly man for financial gain. No names. Just a carefully worded accusation with a tone of heartbreak. Mom left a trail of crying emojis under it. Tyler commented, "People show their true colors when money's involved." It didn't take long before the rest of the family chimed in. Cousins, old neighbors, even one of Mom's church friends who'd always loved her grace. Every ping of my phone felt like static under my skin. I scrolled through hundreds of comments, every one of them a small cut. She always seemed so cold. She used to be such a nice girl. Poor Helen. She doesn't deserve this. I didn't reply. Instead, I screenshot everything and sent it to myself. Date, time, usernames, all filed neatly into a folder on my desktop titled Documentation. It was the same folder where I kept every email Mom had ever written that used words like ungrateful embarrassment or disappointment. Every text she'd sent reminding me that family comes first right after tearing me down in public. I stopped crying around the third day. By then, the noise started to sound almost mechanical. They were running on autopilot gossip, pity, outrage, repeat. I'd been the scapegoat long enough to know the rhythm of their cruelty. So I learned to play along. When coworkers at the firm whispered about the Facebook drama, I smiled. "You know how families are," I said lightly. "We all have our versions of the truth." That calm, unnerved people more than any denial could. By Friday, I started noticing small oddities. My email password reset itself twice. My credit card company flagged an attempted charge from a boutique Mom loved. Then a message from the university's financial office hit my inbox request to cancel tuition coverage for Tyler Monroe, submitted by Eva Monroe. My stomach turned. Within minutes, my phone rang Mom. "Are you out of your mind?" she hissed, skipping any greeting. "You think this is funny? You think ruining your brother's education will make you look like a saint? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb." "Eva, they called this morning. You tried to cancel Tyler's tuition coverage. I didn't contact them." "Oh, please." Her voice rose venom disguised as outrage. "You've embarrassed this family enough. You think changing that will give you the right to destroy everyone else's life? I haven't done anything I said evenly. But maybe whoever did is just giving you a taste of your own game." She went silent. Then coldly, "Careful, Eva. You've already burned one bridge. Don't burn the rest." She hung up before I could answer. I stood there for a long moment, phone still in hand, pulse steady. Then I opened the documentation folder again. This time I created a new subfolder, Countermoves. I started small, locked down every account, changed every password, called the university, explained that a fraudulent request had been made. The administrator apologized and flagged the incident. I could tell from her tone she'd already heard whispers. Next, I installed a new home security app, motion sensors, cloud backup, live notifications. It pinged every time a car passed, which was both annoying and comforting. That weekend, I drove back to Grandpa's. He was in his workshop sorting through old papers. When I told him what happened, he listened quietly, hands folded on the table. "They're getting desperate," he said finally. "Desperate people make sloppy choices. What should I do? Nothing rash. Let them keep thinking you're fragile. It'll make the truth louder when it finally speaks." He slid a brown envelope across the table. "Keep this one with the first." Inside were notarized transcripts of phone calls, conversations between Helen and Greg, discussing adjustments to Grandpa's accounts, plans to handle things before he gets any ideas. My throat tightened. "Why didn't you show me this sooner?" "Because timing is everything," he said simply. "And now, it's time." That night, I read every page, every timestamp. My mother's voice on paper, scheming, calculating, felt like proof of something I'd always known, but never been able to prove that I wasn't the problem. I was the obstacle. The next morning, I drove to Tyler's apartment. He opened the door, still half asleep, hoodie on, hair a mess. "Wow," he said, surprised. "Didn't expect you." "I bet." I stepped inside. "You should stop letting Mom use you as her mouthpiece." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean? It means you're helping her dig a hole she's going to drag you into." He scoffed. "She's just trying to protect Grandpa. You're the one taking advantage." I handed him one of the transcripts. Read it. He skimmed the first lines, face paling, as his own name appeared, Mom telling Greg to use his university account as a contact reference for a forged loan document. "This isn't fake, it's notarized, Tyler. Grandpa had it recorded. Do you really think I'd go this far to make something up?" He didn't answer. "You've always believed her," I said softly, "because it was easier than admitting she's wrong. But that belief's going to cost you everything." I left the folder on his counter and walked out. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed again, another motion alert. Living room camera detected movement. I opened the app. The feed showed a hooded figure standing at my desk. 5 minutes later, they were gone. No forced entry, just a key. And there was only one person who'd ever had a copy, Tyler. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I downloaded the clip, saved it to documentation, and sent a backup to my lawyer friend from college, just in case. That night, sitting in the dark, I realized how calm I felt. They thought I was cornered, but they didn't understand the difference between silence and surrender. I wasn't done. I was waiting for the laughter to die. And when it did, I'd deliver my one line. The message came on a Tuesday afternoon. Mom, we're having a family dinner this weekend, just to clear the air. It wasn't a request. It never was. Mom's invitations were commands wrapped in courtesy. I stared at the text for a while, half smiling. Clear the air. That was her code for control the narrative. I typed a single word back, sure. Then I called Grandpa. He didn't sound surprised. She's panicking, he said. That's when she makes mistakes. What do I bring? I asked. Just yourself, he said. Then after a pause, and the truth. Saturday came heavy with humidity. I parked down the block engine, off-hands resting on the steering wheel. For a moment, I watched the house through the windshield, the fairy lights, the freshly trimmed hedges, the same picture-perfect setting as the reunion night. Except this time, the quiet was wrong, staged, like a play waiting for its audience. I stepped out the gravel, crunching under my shoes, and the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and smoke. When I rang the doorbell, it wasn't Mom who answered. It was Tyler. He looked tired, pale, eyes rimmed red like he hadn't slept. You shouldn't have come, he muttered. Then why did she invite me? He didn't answer, just moved aside to let me in. Inside the dining room was spotless table set with silverware, napkins folded, wine breathing in crystal glasses. Mom sat at the head of the table, pearls around her neck blouse, sky blue smile perfectly rehearsed. To her right sat Uncle Greg, already pretending he belonged somewhere else. Aunt Kara, quiet for once, scrolled her phone nervously. My father sat at the far end, hands clasped, eyes on the table. The tension was thick enough to taste. Eva, Mom said, rising just enough to kiss the air near my cheek. I'm glad you came. We've had misunderstandings lately. Is that what we're calling it? I said, sitting down across from her. She ignored the jab. We just want to move forward. No more hostility, no more gossip. Sounds healthy, I said. Tyler sat beside her, head down. I could see the tremor in his hand as he lifted his glass. Mom smiled at the mediator sitting quietly near the doorway, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a clipboard. We thought it would be good to have someone neutral present, Mom said smoothly, just to help us talk like a family again. I almost laughed. Sure, nothing says family love like a legal witness. Mom's jaw tightened for half a second. Then she smoothed it over with another smile. I just want to make sure my father's affairs are being handled properly. I'm concerned about the changes that were made to his will. There it was, the real reason. You mean the changes he made because you and Greg tried to forge loan documents under his name? I asked. Greg shifted uncomfortably. That's ridiculous. I reached into my bag and laid a folder on the table. The brown envelope with Grandpa's careful handwriting. I brought copies of those conversations, actually. Transcripts. Dated, notarized. Mom's fingers twitched. Eva, this isn't fake, I said. I thought you might say that. I slid another paper across the table. Here's the notary seal. Grandpa's lawyer verified it last week. The mediator adjusted her glasses, scanning the page. Mrs. Monroe, she said gently, these are quite serious claims. Mom's smile stayed frozen, but her knuckles whitened around the stem of her glass. My father was not in his right mind. He was confused, manipulated. Confused enough to record your phone calls, I asked, or to file a trust under an independent bank before the will was updated. Her eyes flicked to me, sharp assessing. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I reached into the folder again and pulled out the trust statement, the bank letterhead gleaming under the light. He wanted me to be independent, free from all of this. That's why he did it quietly, because he knew if you found out, you'd try to stop him. Eva, my father said softly, maybe this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, I said. My voice didn't rise, but it carried. You all wanted to clear the air. Fine. Here's the air unfiltered. The mediator glanced between us, clearly sensing the storm. Perhaps we should take a moment, but I wasn't done. You remember your joke, Mom, I asked, leaning back at the reunion. If Eva disappeared tomorrow, no one would even miss her. The room went still. I waited for the laughter to die, I continued, and I promised myself that when I finally spoke, I'd make sure no one ever forgot what you did. I tapped the folder lightly. This is my one line. Mom's breath hitched. Her smile cracked. Not a big break, just a flicker at first, like a glass fracturing under heat. Then it spread. You think this makes you the hero? She snapped. You've torn this family apart. No, I said quietly. I just stopped letting you use me as glue. Greg pushed his chair back. This is insane. We shouldn't even... Sit down! Mom barked, voice trembling now. For a long, unbearable moment, the room was nothing but silence and the faint buzz of the ceiling light. Then Mom turned to the mediator, voice suddenly soft again. Do you see how ungrateful she is after everything we've done? The mediator hesitated, then said gently, Mrs. Monroe, I believe your daughter has evidence that warrants legal review. Perhaps continuing this meeting isn't productive. Mom's composure cracked completely. She slammed her glass down. You think you've won? You're nothing without me. You've always been nothing, across the table. Dad finally spoke. Enough. It was quiet, but it sliced through the air. Everyone turned. He looked at her with eyes I'd never seen clear, exhausted, done. You've been trying to control everyone so long you forgot what love looks like. For once, she didn't have a comeback. Her lips trembled, mascara smudging just slightly. He was supposed to leave it all to me, she whispered. He did, I said softly. He left you the consequences. Her smile collapsed completely. No one made a sound. Tyler stared at the table. Greg stared at the floor, and Aunt Kara clutched her phone like it could save her. The mediator quietly gathered her notes, standing as if afraid to disturb the fragile silence. I took my time packing the folder back into my bag. The zipper sounded loud in the stillness. When I stood, I looked at each of them, Mom's pale face, Dad's quiet relief, Tyler's shame. You all laughed that night, I said. Now it's my turn. Then I walked out. The house was strangely bright sunlight hitting every spotless corner. Outside, the air felt lighter. I could hear birds, the hum of distant traffic. For the first time in years, the noise didn't feel like a threat. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed Grandpa's name. You did it, he asked when I answered. I did. A pause. Then his quiet chuckle. Good. You handled it better than I ever did. I'm tired, Grandpa. I know, sweetheart. But now you can rest. They can't touch you anymore. I looked up at the house one last time. The curtains shifted in the upstairs window, Mom's silhouette small and still. I wasn't angry anymore, just empty, in a way that felt clean. Because the joke was finally over, and the silence that followed, it was mine. The fallout came quiet, not like a storm with thunder and drama, but like snow. Slow, relentless, covering everything. 3 days after that dinner, the Monroe family's digital life went dark. Mom deleted her Facebook. Aunt Kara's posts vanished overnight. Greg's business page rebranded under a new name. Different logo, same fraud investigation pending. Tyler's college email auto-replied. This account is temporarily suspended pending review. No one called me. No one apologized. And that was fine, because I didn't need their words anymore. I had the silence, and for the first time, it was peace, not punishment. Grandpa called every evening that week. He didn't ask for details. He just checked in, like always. How's the air up there, he'd ask. Smell cleaner. Yet. It does, I told him. Like rain after a fire. Dad stopped by once, a grocery bag in hand, pretending it was just to drop something off. He looked thinner, but lighter somehow. When I asked about Mom, his answer was simple. She's gone to stay with her sister for a while. The lawyer said it's best we don't talk until things settle. Do you think she'll ever change? I asked. He stared out the window for a long time before shaking his head. No, people like your mother don't change Eva. They just find new mirrors. But that's not your responsibility anymore. He left a few minutes later, but his words lingered heavy and freeing at the same time. The following week, Grandpa called again, this time with something in his voice. Relief. Maybe even pride. You've done what I couldn't, he said. You stopped the cycle. I didn't stop it, I said quietly. I just stepped out of it. That's the same thing, he replied. 2 months later, I packed up my apartment and moved north to Vermont. The cabin Grandpa always said would be mine sat by a lake so still it looked like glass. The first night there, I barely slept. It wasn't fear, it was disbelief. The quiet was so complete it felt like a new language I had to learn to speak. Mornings were slow. I'd wake to the sound of the creek and the smell of pine. The sun would slip through the blinds and scatter across the wooden floor. I started taking long walks, something I hadn't done in years, just letting the air fill my lungs without that familiar tightness in my chest. Some nights, I'd sit by the fire and reread Grandpa's letter, the one he'd hidden in Grandma's old jewelry box. The paper was thin, almost translucent from the years. His handwriting was shaky, but steady enough to carry weight. Eva, if you're reading this, it means you found your voice. Don't let them convince you peace requires permission. You've earned your silence. You've earned your freedom. Remember what they call betrayal? I call survival. Every line felt like it had been written for this exact moment. I folded it carefully and put it back in the box next to the string of Grandma's pearls. For a while, I just sat there tracing the grain of the wood, listening to the wind outside. The phone rang once that night. Dad again. I just wanted to say, "Thank you," he said. For what? For not becoming her. It was the kind of sentence that carried years of apology without ever saying the word. After we hung up, I went outside. The lake reflected the moonlight like silver. Somewhere in the woods, an owl called. Everything felt distant but alive, like I was finally standing at the edge of my own story instead of someone else's. A week later, I got a letter from the lawyer's office confirming the final settlement. The trust was secure, the property fully transferred. Grandpa had added a note at the bottom in his usual blunt style. They'll have to rebuild their lives the hard way now. That's fair. I smiled when I read it. Not out of triumph, just quiet understanding. I wasn't naive enough to think this was the end. Family doesn't vanish. It lingers, reshapes itself in whispers and memories. But what my mother had built control, performance, fear, it had finally cracked. Sometimes I caught myself wondering what she was doing, whether she hated me or pitied me. But then I'd remember the look on her face at that table the exact second her smile collapsed, and I knew it didn't matter. That look was the truth. Everything after was just aftermath. One morning, I drove into town for groceries. At the coffee shop, a stranger smiled at me and asked if I was new around here. For the first time in years, I said yes without feeling like a lie. Back at the cabin, the afternoon light filtered through the trees, golden and forgiving. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, and felt something I hadn't felt since childhood, quiet pride. Not for what I'd gained, but for what I'd refused to lose. The ability to be alone and unafraid. That night, I wrote a line in my journal, just one sentence. She tried to make me disappear. Instead, she disappeared from the story, and maybe that was enough justice for one lifetime. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It doesn't come with slammed doors or broken glass. Sometimes it's just the quiet that follows when you stop explaining yourself. 2 months ago, I sat at a table surrounded by laughter that wasn't real and people who didn't see me. Now I wake up to the sound of water against the dock and the wind moving through the pines. No noise, no performance, no need to prove anything. The world didn't collapse when I walked away. It got smaller, calmer, truer. And maybe that's what real revenge looks like, not destruction, but distance. Not fire, but freedom. If you've ever been the one they laughed at, the one they dismissed, the one they thought would never stand up, listen to me. You don't have to fight to be heard. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is leave. And when you do leave, completely. Because peace isn't something they give you. It's something you take back. If this story hits somewhere deep for you, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. You're not alone. Hit subscribe and I'll tell you more stories about the quiet kind of revenge.
Emily, I think I want an open marriage. Those were the first words my husband said as he sat down across from me at our kitchen table that night. No preamble, no hesitation. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence between us, and my hand froze midway to my glass of water. Then he smiled that new, measured smile that never quite reached his eyes anymore and said softly, "You look shocked." I was. Not because the idea of infidelity hadn't crossed my mind, but because it had never belonged to him. Daniel Ward. 40 years old, dependable. Grounded the man who once said his idea of rebellion was skipping dessert. My name is Emily Ward, 35 project manager by day, overthinker by night. For 7 years, I built my marriage with precision, a quiet home stable, income shared dreams. We'd been saving for our first house, the one with the maple tree and the wide porch we'd talk about every Sunday morning. But lately I'd started to feel like I was building a dream alone. I set my glass down slowly. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" He leaned back, fingers laced behind his head, a posture I'd never seen on him before. Confident, almost performative. "I've been doing a lot of work on myself lately. Vanessa says people change when they stop pretending." There it was again. That name. Vanessa. His life coach, though, from the way he said it, you'd think she was a prophet. I tried to keep my voice even. "Work on yourself, like therapy." "Not therapy," he said, quickly shaking his head. "More like awakening. She runs these workshops, Awaken the Masculine Within. It's about rejecting old conditioning, breaking free from expectations." Expectations. I knew which ones he meant. The marriage, the bills, me. I folded my hands, pretending calm. "And how does opening our marriage fit into this awakening?" He sighed like a teacher disappointed in a slow student. "It's about honesty, Emily, authenticity. We both deserve the chance to explore what we've been denying ourselves. Don't you ever wonder who you could be if you weren't someone's wife?" I wanted to laugh, but the sound died in my throat. Instead, I stared at him, at the man I'd loved since my 20s, who once stayed up all night beside me when my mother was in the hospital, who used to bring me coffee just the way I liked it without asking. Now he spoke like a stranger quoting someone else's beliefs. "I don't feel trapped, Daniel," I said quietly. "But if you do, you should at least be honest about why." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. That was the thing about Daniel lately. He was full of rehearsed speeches, but empty when confronted with reality. When he finally spoke, his voice softened. "I love you, Emily. I do. But I'm not in love with you anymore." That sentence landed like a knife sliding between ribs, slow, precise, final. I couldn't find my voice. I just nodded because anything I said might have turned into begging, and I refused to beg for someone who'd already left in spirit. Daniel kept talking about how Vanessa helped him reconnect with his inner self, how monogamy was a construct, how love could be expanded. Every word felt like watching a house I built brick by brick catch fire, while the person inside smiled and said it was transformation. At some point I whispered, "Are you seeing her?" He looked offended. "This isn't about Vanessa, it's about me." But his eyes darted away just long enough for me to know the truth. I stood needing distance. "Then you should take all the space you need, Daniel." He frowned. "You're misunderstanding. I'm not ending things. I just want us both to be free." "Free?" The word echoed in the kitchen, sharp and cruel. Without another word, I walked to the bedroom and opened the closet. The familiar scent of cedar hit me, the scent of a shared life. I pulled out a suitcase, the one we'd used on our honeymoon to Santorini. Behind me, his footsteps followed. "Emily, don't do this. You're being reactive." I turned, forcing my voice to stay calm. "You just told me you're not in love with me and you want to sleep with other people. I think I'm reacting appropriately." His jaw tightened. "You're twisting my words." "No, Daniel," I said softly. "I'm finally hearing them." I packed silently my laptop, my clothes, my toothbrush, while he stood in the doorway talking about evolution and freedom like those words could replace loyalty. When I zipped the suitcase, the sound was deafening. "Where will you go?" he asked. "Somewhere that doesn't make me question my worth every time I walk in the door." He reached out, but I stepped back. "You wanted space, Daniel. You have it now." And with that, I left. Outside, the air was cold and biting. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the dark windows of the home that wasn't mine anymore. Part of me waited for him to come out to chase me, to say he'd made a mistake. But the door never opened. Instead, my phone buzzed, a message from him. "I know this is hard, but this is the right thing for both of us. You'll understand one day." I looked at the words until they blurred. Then I turned off my phone, started the engine, and drove into the night. No destination, just distance. As the highway lights streaked past my windshield, one thought kept repeating in my mind like a broken prayer. He doesn't love you anymore. He just doesn't know how to admit it without sounding enlightened. And somewhere between one city and the next, I stopped crying. Because for the first time in months, I realized something Daniel hadn't. Freedom isn't walking away. It's letting go. The next morning, Daniel called me. Not to apologize, not to ask where I'd gone, just to say, "I hope you're calmer now." I remember staring at my phone, my coffee turning cold beside me in the tiny hotel room I'd checked into the night before. He spoke like I was the one who'd lost control, like walking away from a man who just destroyed 7 years of marriage was a tantrum, not survival. "I'm calm," I said flatly. "I'm also done." He sighed on the other end. "Emily, don't be dramatic. We can talk through this. Maybe we just need boundaries." "Boundaries," I echoed. You mean the kind that lets you explore other women while I sit at home pretending it's spiritual growth? There was a pause. Then his tone shifted, that slow, patronizing calm that used to make me second guess myself. It's not about other women. It's about expansion. We've been living small. Vanessa says, "Don't." My voice cracked sharper than I expected. "Don't bring her name into our marriage." He didn't reply, and for a moment I thought I heard the faint sound of waves in the background. Then it clicked. He was calling from the retreat center, the one Vanessa ran, the one I'd helped him fund when he said it was a business investment. I hung up without saying goodbye. That was the last conversation we had before I filed for divorce. The following days blurred into a strange rhythm. Emails to lawyers, calls to the bank, the quiet panic of moving out of a life you'd thought was permanent. I spent the first night in my new apartment, sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes and silence. It wasn't grief that filled the air, it was disbelief. That a man could stand beside you for 7 years, say I love you 1,000 times, and still wake up one morning, convinced that freedom meant walking away from you. Every object I unpacked told a story. The chipped mug he'd bought me on our first anniversary. The framed photo of us in Italy, his arm around me, eyes crinkled in sunlight. The house key I'd once thought we'd use for our forever home. I held that key for a long time, then dropped it into the trash. A week later, I received a long email from Daniel. The subject line read, "Please read before you make a mistake. Emily." I know you're hurt, but this doesn't have to mean the end. I still care about you deeply. I think you're just reacting out of fear. Vanessa says fear is the ego trying to hold on to control. Let's take a break, not a divorce. Please don't do anything irreversible. I stared at the words until the letters seemed to float. Even now, he couldn't own what he'd done. He had to filter it through Vanessa's borrowed wisdom. It wasn't love he was offering, it was condescension disguised as compassion. I replied with a single sentence. I already did something irreversible, Daniel. I stopped loving a man who uses excuses to lie. Then I hit send and closed the laptop. For weeks, he kept reaching out calls, voice messages, handwritten letters left at the old apartment. His tone changed with every attempt. At first, calm. We're just figuring out who we are. This can make us stronger. Then guilt-ridden. We've been through too much to throw it away. Then angry. You're making me the villain when all I did was be honest. And finally desperate. Please, Emily, don't do this. Vanessa's retreat is almost ready to launch. Once I'm settled, things will make sense again. That last one almost made me laugh. He truly believed things would make sense once his fantasy life stabilized, as if emotional betrayal could be managed like a spreadsheet. But what he didn't realize was that I was already rebuilding. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Caroline, handled the paperwork efficiently. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses during our first meeting and said, "Most clients cry at least once. You haven't yet." I smiled weakly. Maybe I cried all my tears before I got here. Caroline nodded. Good. Then let's get you free on paper too. Within 2 weeks, the documents were ready. I sent them to Daniel through certified mail, a deliberate choice. I wanted him to sign his name beside his awakening. He didn't reply for 3 days. Then came the text. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." I typed back. "You thought I'd wait for you to decide if I'm enough. I won't." I kept busy work, exercise, small rituals that filled the emptiness. There were still moments that hurt unexpectedly, hearing his favorite song in a cafe, passing couples who laugh the way we used to. But pain is strange. It comes in waves, and if you stand still long enough, it passes through you instead of drowning you. I started sleeping through the night again. I started liking the silence. And one morning, as sunlight streamed through my new kitchen window, I realized I hadn't thought about Daniel in 2 whole days. It was a small victory, but it felt like breathing after years underwater. Then, out of nowhere, a message arrived from a mutual friend, Megan. Her text was short, but loaded. "I don't know if you've heard, but Daniel quit his job. Says he's going all in on Vanessa's retreat. Moved into her place full time." I just stared at my screen. There it was, confirmation of what I'd known all along. I felt no anger, only a hollow sort of pity. Daniel had traded stability for illusion, love for ego, a marriage for a movement he didn't even understand. And all I could think was, I hope the freedom he wanted keeps him warm at night. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my journal for the first time in months. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Sometimes the people who preach about finding themselves are just trying to escape who they've become. Underneath it, I added, and sometimes walking away is the most loving thing you can do for both of you. Then I closed the book, turned off my phone, and sat in silence, not lonely, not heartbroken, just free. When I left Daniel, I didn't pack for forever, I packed for survival. A week's worth of clothes, my laptop, and the stack of journals that had once held dreams for a future that no longer existed. At first, I kept telling myself this was temporary, that he'd wake up from his so-called awakening, realize what he'd thrown away, and call me home. But as the days stretched into weeks, I realized something deeper. It wasn't him who needed to wake up. It was me. I remember standing in line at the bank that Monday morning, closing our joint account. The teller looked up polite but curious. "Are you sure you want to transfer the entire balance, Mrs. Ward?" "Mrs. Ward." The name stung like a bruise pressed too hard. I nodded. "Yes, half to this new account under Emily Ward only." By that evening, the funds were mine. $47,000 I'd saved through endless nights of extra work, skipped vacations, and saying no to things I wanted so that we could have more later. Only there was no we anymore. That night, I sat in my small apartment surrounded by cardboard boxes and the smell of fresh paint staring at the number on my bank app. It felt both empowering and hollow. Money couldn't fill the space where trust used to live. Still, it was something real, something I could control, unlike Daniel, unlike love. A few days later, Caroline called. "The divorce filing is in motion," she said. "Once he's served, the countdown starts." "Served?" I asked. "Yes. A process server will deliver the papers. You don't have to see him. You don't have to talk to him." Relief washed over me. I hadn't realized until that moment how much energy I'd wasted rehearsing what I'd say if I ever saw him again. Now I didn't have to. "Thank you," I whispered. Caroline paused. "You're handling this better than most. No anger." I thought for a long time before answering. "There's anger," I said quietly, "but it's buried under something stronger, disappointment." Daniel didn't take the news quietly. Within hours of being served at Vanessa's retreat, he called me 6 times. I didn't answer. Then came the messages. "Emily, we don't have to do this. I know I hurt you, but everything I'm doing is temporary. Vanessa's helping me find clarity. You'll see." Then hours later, "You're not even giving me a chance after everything we've been through." And finally, "I can't believe you'd humiliate me like this in front of everyone. You could have at least talked to me first." I read them all one by one, then deleted them. Not out of spite, but because I refused to let his confusion rewrite the narrative. He wanted freedom. I was just giving it to him. Weeks turned into months. I found a rhythm in my new life: quiet mornings, coffee by the window, the sound of my neighbor's dog barking as he left for work. I filled my days with projects, late-night runs, and dinners with friends who didn't ask about Daniel unless I brought him up first. But sometimes when the world went still, when the phone stopped buzzing and the city outside went dark, I'd catch myself replaying our life together. The first time he kissed me under the rain outside my old apartment. The way he used to hum absent-mindedly while making pancakes on Sundays. The night he proposed, hands trembling, eyes soft with certainty. I missed that version of him, the one who loved me, before he learned to talk about alignment and energetic freedom. But that version of him was gone, and the man who replaced him was someone I didn't recognize. 3 months after the divorce filing, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I let it ring, assuming it was another client. But then came a voicemail. "Emily, it's Megan. We haven't spoken in a while, but you should probably know. Daniel's in trouble." I played it again, heart pounding. Vanessa disappeared. The retreat's a mess. Investors pulled out. She took his savings, and maybe yours too, if he used that joint account before you closed it. He's not doing well. He's been sleeping at the studio. Please call me. For a long time, I just sat there. Not shocked, not vindicated, just still. Because I'd known this was coming the moment he traded our life for her promises. I finally texted back. "Thanks, Megan. I hope he finds his footing. But I can't be part of that anymore." Her reply came minutes later. "He's lost everything, Emily. I think he finally realizes what he did." I stared at those words for a long time. Once they would have filled me with a cruel sense of satisfaction. But now all I felt was tired. That night, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. Outside, rain streaked down the glass in long, trembling lines. I thought about how love can change, how something once sacred can become a weight, how a promise can turn into a cage. Daniel said he wanted to find himself. And maybe he did. He found the part of himself that couldn't handle loyalty when life got quiet. I whispered his name once, not as a curse, not as a plea. Just as a memory I was finally ready to release. Then I took a slow breath, opened my laptop, and typed a message to Caroline. Let's finalize everything. I'm ready to move on. And I meant it, because somewhere between heartbreak and healing, I had rediscovered something I'd forgotten myself. It was a quiet Sunday morning when the news reached me. The kind of morning that used to belong to coffee laughter and Daniel humming some old tune while reading the paper. Now the only sound in my apartment was the low whir of my ceiling fan and the steady buzz of my phone against the table. It was Megan again. Emily, I really think you should hear this. I sighed and picked up. Megan, I told you. I know she cut in quickly. You don't want to talk about him, but this isn't gossip. It's bad. I leaned back, bracing myself. Go on. She hesitated, her voice trembling just slightly. Vanessa's retreat, it collapsed. Investors are demanding refunds. Apparently, she used Daniel's name on some of the documents. He's being investigated. My stomach tightened. Investigated. For fraud, maybe. Or at least for financial misrepresentation. No one's sure yet. But Emily, she took everything. His savings, the donations, even the equipment leases were in his name. He's ruined. For a moment, the world went quiet. Ruined. That word hung in the air, heavy and final. Where is he now? I asked, even though I didn't really want to know. He's been crashing with different people. Vanessa left town 2 weeks ago. No one's seen her since. I closed my eyes. I'd imagined this scene before, though not out of spite, just inevitability. It was the ending written in invisible ink the day Daniel traded stability for a fantasy. Megan exhaled softly. He's too proud to call you, but I think he wants to. Then let him want, I said, my voice calm, detached. Wanting's the only thing he ever truly committed to. Later that night, I sat on my couch phone, still in hand, replaying Megan's words. For a fleeting moment, guilt pricked at me. Not for leaving him, I'd done what I had to, but for not feeling the kind of sorrow a wife should feel hearing her husband's life had fallen apart. But that's the thing, he wasn't my husband anymore. He was a man I used to love, who'd burned down everything we'd built. I thought back to the first time he'd mentioned Vanessa's retreat. It had sounded harmless then, a week-long mindfulness workshop. He'd said it was about reconnecting with purpose, about finding balance. But somewhere between the meditation mats and the spiritual jargon, she had found the one thing Daniel couldn't resist: validation. She made him feel extraordinary, special, something I, in all my ordinary love and daily devotion, could never compete with. That realization used to sting. Now it just made sense. The next day, I was in the middle of a team meeting when a number I didn't recognize flashed across my phone. I declined it. It rang again immediately. By the third time, I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. I already knew who it was before I answered. Emily. His voice was soft, not the confident, certain tone I remembered, but something smaller, worn down. Daniel, I didn't think you'd pick up. I almost didn't. There was silence. I could hear him breathing, could picture him running his hand through his hair the way he always did when he didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell you I'm sorry, he finally said, for everything. Vanessa, the retreat, all of it. You were right, about everything. I closed my eyes. It's not about being right, Daniel. I lost everything, he said quietly. The house fund, the job, the savings. It's all gone. My breath caught. The house fund. Before you closed the joint account, I used some of it. For the retreat, he admitted. I thought it would grow the business. His voice broke. I thought it would make you proud of me. I leaned against the wall, the cool paint pressing against my back. There was a time when that confession would have crushed me. But now it only made me realize how deep his delusion had gone. You didn't need to make me proud, I said softly. You just needed to be honest. I know, he whispered, and now it's too late. We sat in silence, two ghosts tethered by the faint echo of a life we once shared. Then I said the words that had been sitting on my tongue for months. You wanted freedom, Daniel. You found it. But freedom without integrity isn't liberation, it's collapse. He didn't respond, just a quiet, broken exhale. Take care of yourself, I said. Then ended the call before he could answer. That night I couldn't sleep. I got up, made tea, and stood by the window, staring at the city lights. Somewhere out there, he was probably doing the same, staring at the same skyline, wondering how everything had slipped away. For years, I'd thought our love was unbreakable because it was built on endurance, shared dreams, shared sacrifices. But endurance without truth is just delay. The cracks had been there all along. I'd just called them compromise. And now the house fund we'd built together was gone. The house itself, the dream had never been real. But as strange as it sounds, I didn't feel robbed. Because the home I truly wanted wasn't made of bricks and savings, it was peace. And for the first time in years, I had it. The next morning, I went for a run before sunrise. The air was cold, the streets quiet, and for a brief, perfect moment, I felt weightless, unbound by what was or what could have been. At a red light, I paused, catching my reflection in a shop window. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same Emily who'd once begged Daniel to stay, who'd mistaken chaos for growth. She was stronger, steadier, and for the first time, free on her own terms. The phone buzzed again in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I just kept running. A full year passed before I heard his voice again. By then, the divorce had been finalized, the papers sealed, and my life had quietly rearranged itself into something steady, something mine. I'd built routines, morning jogs, weekend farmers markets, evenings spent with friends who made me laugh without mentioning his name. Peace had become a habit. And then one night, in late spring, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Daniel. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over delete. But I didn't. I just set the phone down and let it ring again. Hours later, ignored, unanswered. Then came another message. I made a mess of everything. I thought I was searching for something higher, but I was just running from what was real. You. I didn't reply. He kept writing. Not every day, but often enough to remind me that regret ages slower than guilt. "You were always the one who believed in me, Emily. I didn't see it then. Vanessa's gone. She's in Bali or somewhere. She never cared. I think about you when I walk by the old cafe. You love their hazelnut latte. Do you still go there?" Sometimes I'd read the messages before bed, then turn my phone face down on the nightstand feeling nothing but distance. Because that was the cruelest truth of all, not that I hated him, but that I didn't anymore. One afternoon I got a call from Megan. Her tone was hesitant, the way people sound when they're not sure how much pain you've healed from. "Emily, Daniel's been asking around about you. He says he wants to apologize in person." I laughed softly. Apologize or be forgiven. She sighed. "Both maybe. I hope he finds what he's looking for," I said simply, "but it won't be me." Still, curiosity is a quiet poison. That night, I scrolled through his old social media out of habit. The man who once posted quotes about authentic living now shared pictures of sunsets, with vague captions like "learning from mistakes and starting again." His eyes looked tired, heavier, like he was carrying too many what-ifs. I closed the app and slept soundly for the first time in weeks. 2 months later, he showed up. I was leaving my office when I saw him standing in the lobby. Thinner, older, dressed in clothes that didn't quite fit. For a second, I didn't recognize him. "Emily." Hearing my name and his voice after all that time hit like a sudden wind. He stepped forward, tentative. "You look good." I nodded. "You don't." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Fair." We stood in silence, surrounded by the faint echo of heels and phones and other people's lives moving on. Finally, I asked, "What do you want, Daniel?" He swallowed hard. "To say I'm sorry. Really sorry. For everything. For not seeing what I had. For thinking that being free meant walking away from you." I said nothing. He continued, voice trembling now. "You were my anchor, and I mistook that for being held down. I thought I needed to fly, but I just fell." I looked at him, then really looked, and realized something that startled me. I didn't see my husband anymore. I saw a man who'd broken something sacred and was finally standing in the rubble, wondering why it still hurt. "You hurt me, Daniel," I said quietly. "But the worst part isn't that you left. It's that you made me doubt whether love meant anything at all." His eyes filled, but he didn't look away. "Do you think you could ever forgive me?" "I already did," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean return." He took a shaky breath. "Are you seeing someone?" I hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. "Yes. His name's Andrew. He's kind, steady, and he doesn't confuse chaos with passion." Daniel looked down, shoulders collapsing slightly. "Is it serious?" "It's honest," I said, and that was all that needed to be said. He followed me outside, the evening light stretching long shadows across the pavement. "Emily," he said softly, "I don't deserve another chance, but I wish you'd at least remember the good parts. We were happy once, weren't we?" I turned to face him fully. "We were. But happiness isn't the same as wholeness. You wanted to find yourself Daniel, and you found the part of you that didn't know how to stay." He opened his mouth to reply, but I was already walking toward my car. As I reached for the handle, he called out, "Do you ever think about us?" I paused just long enough to answer truthfully. "Sometimes," I said, "but only the way you think about a dream after you wake up. You remember the feeling, not the story." Then I got in the car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing there, small against the fading light, looking like a man who finally understood the cost of freedom. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote one final entry in the journal I'd started the week he left me. The ink bled a little as I wrote. Some people spend years chasing what they already had mistaken contentment for confinement. I spent 2 years learning that peace isn't what you find after love ends, it's what begins when you stop waiting for someone to come back. I closed the journal, set it on the shelf beside the others, and turned off the light. For the first time in years, the past didn't feel heavy anymore. It just was. I didn't cry after seeing Daniel that day. Not on the drive home, not later that night when the memories tried to creep in through the cracks of silence. I just felt clean. Like the ache that had lived under my ribs for years had finally loosened its grip and dissolved into something softer acceptance. That's the thing no one tells you about heartbreak. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's peace, and peace is quiet. A few weeks later, I stood on the porch of my new home, my home. A modest craftsman with sunlit windows, a garden of wild lavender, and walls painted the color of calm mornings. It wasn't the dream house Daniel and I had once planned, but it was real. It was mine. I had used what remained of our savings, my savings, to buy it. Every brick felt like proof that I had rebuilt from the ashes. Proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet, not in spite of what he did, but because of it. As I unpacked boxes, I found things that carried echoes of the past. A chipped coffee mug. The wedding photo I couldn't bring myself to throw away, the journal, where I'd once written, "I hope we never lose this." I smiled at that line, not with bitterness, but with something close to gratitude. Because we did lose it, and losing it made room for who I'd become. Sometimes friends still ask about him. They tiptoe around his name as if it's a fragile thing that might crack the air. "Do you ever think about Daniel?" one asked over dinner one night. I took a sip of wine and smiled faintly. "Not really. Not the way you think. He's more of a lesson now than a memory." They nodded, unsure what to say next. But I knew exactly what I meant. Daniel had been my mirror, showing me where I was, too soft, too patient, too willing to shrink myself for someone else's comfort. He'd taught me what love shouldn't cost. Months passed. Seasons turned. Life became filled with small joys that felt almost sacred. Morning jogs by the lake, fresh flowers on the kitchen table, Sunday breakfasts with Andrew, the man who'd walked into my life with quiet steadiness and never once made me question my worth. With him, there were no grand gestures, no declarations about freedom or self-discovery, just kindness, honesty, presence. One evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sky fade into gold, he reached for my hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. Leaving him. I looked at him, this man who had no idea how close I'd once come to breaking, and smiled. "Regret? No," I said. "It's the best thing I ever did for myself." He nodded, squeezing my hand gently. And for a moment I thought of Daniel wherever he was and hoped he'd found his peace too. Not the kind that comes from chasing new beginnings, but the kind that comes when you finally stop running from who you are. A few months later, another text arrived from an unfamiliar number. I didn't need to open it to know. Still curiosity won. "I know you won't reply, but I want you to know I understand now what I lost. I hope someday you can forgive me. Daniel." I read it once, twice, then deleted it without hesitation. Not out of anger, but because that chapter no longer needed rereading. The next morning, sunlight spilled across my kitchen as I brewed coffee and watched the world outside wake up. The past felt distant, like an old dream I'd finally outgrown. I thought of that girl I used to be, the one who cried in a hotel room, clutching her suitcase and asking herself how everything had fallen apart. She had no idea that falling apart was how she would eventually fall into herself. And for that I was grateful. I took a slow breath, savoring the stillness, and whispered to no one in particular. Maybe to him, maybe to the woman I used to be. "You wanted freedom, Daniel. You got it, and so did I." I stepped out onto the porch, the morning light warm against my face. Birds chattered in the distance, and the air smelled like rain and new beginnings. For the first time in a long time, everything was exactly as it should be. My name is Jane McClary. I'm 30 years old, and that Tuesday was supposed to be ordinary, quiet, predictable, maybe even a little boring. But it became the day my world split clean in two. I'd just finished presenting my firm's biggest architecture proposal of the year, a project that had consumed me for months. When the client signed off early, I packed up beaming and thought finally something to celebrate. Elliot, my boyfriend of 4 years, was the first person I wanted to tell. We'd been living together for 2, sharing a small apartment overlooking the river. The place wasn't fancy, but it was ours. We'd spent countless nights cooking together, arguing about movies, and making plans for the future. Lately, I'd even started looking at engagement rings when I passed jewelry stores. So when I left the office that day, I had one simple plan. Surprise him with takeout from his favorite Thai place and maybe a bottle of wine. I even grabbed a slice of his favorite chocolate cake on the way home. It was just after 6 when I reached our building. The hallway smelled faintly of jasmine and floor cleaner. I slipped off my heels, quietly old habit, and turned the key softly in the lock. I wanted to catch his expression when he saw me. Maybe he'd scoop me up, kiss me, ask why I was home early. Instead, I froze in the doorway. The lights were dim, the curtains half drawn, and there on our gray couch sat Elliot and Rachel, my best friends since college. Her head rested on his shoulder, his hand gently tracing circles on her arm. They weren't kissing. But sometimes you don't need lips to know what's happening. There was something intimate, unspoken in the way they leaned toward each other, like the air between them had a pulse of its own. My keys slipped from my hand, clinking against the counter. The sound made them jerk apart like startled children. Rachel's voice cracked too bright, too nervous. "You're home early." Elliot stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair. "Hey, I thought you had the presentation tonight." "I did," I said quietly. "It went well. I wanted to surprise you." Rachel stood straightening her cardigan. "We were just talking." Talking. My eyes flicked to Elliot's hand, still half reaching toward her. "That what you call it now?" He laughed, forced. "Come on, don't make this weird. Rachel was just, helping me sort out some stuff. About your birthday next month." "My birthday? How poetic." Rachel took a step forward, voice trembling. "Jane, it's not what it looks like." I tilted my head. "Then tell me what it is." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her silence said more than she ever could. For a long moment, no one spoke. The clock on the wall ticked. My takeout bag began to drip sauce onto the tile. The smell of basil and lemongrass filled the room absurdly bright against the sour taste in my mouth. Elliot broke first. "You're overreacting. You always do this, Jane. You jump to conclusions." "Don't call me that," I said. My voice was low, steady. "And don't gaslight me." I walked in. I saw what I saw. Rachel's eyes glistened. It wasn't planned. "We were just talking about you, actually." "Right," I murmured. "How thoughtful of you both." I picked up the bag from the floor, set it on the table, and looked around the apartment. The same walls we'd painted together, the couch we'd chosen after 3 arguments at IKEA, the photo of the 3 of us from last summer's barbecue. The laughter frozen in that picture suddenly felt like mockery. "I should go," Rachel whispered, edging toward the door. "No," Elliot said quickly. "We can explain." But I was already walking past him. "You don't owe me explanations. You made your choices." He reached for my arm. "Jane, stop. You're being dramatic." I turned. "If I were dramatic, you'd be bleeding." The words came out calm, too calm. His hand dropped. I grabbed my keys from the counter, ignoring the mess of pad thai and dripping curry on the table. I didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't demand answers. I just left, because the truth was already in the silence between them. When the elevator doors closed, I saw my reflection in the mirrored wall. Eyes wide, chest tight, holding it together by sheer will. Somewhere deep down, something cracked like glass under pressure. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window of a cheap motel across town, staring at the river I could barely see through the rain. Every few minutes I replayed that image, Rachel's head on his shoulder, his thumb moving gently across her arm. Not a kiss, not quite betrayal in the obvious sense, but it was enough. I thought about how Elliot used to say Rachel reminded him of me before work made me too serious. I thought about how she'd always been around, always laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. I thought about how I'd dismissed my own discomfort because I trusted them both. I trusted them both. Outside, lightning flashed. I whispered to the window, to no one. Maybe this was my fault for thinking loyalty was contagious. By morning, I'd made a decision. No screaming, no revenge, just distance. Because sometimes the quietest exit leaves the loudest echo. The next morning, Elliot texted me 3 times before I'd even left the motel. "Please come home." It was nothing. "You're making this worse than it is." I stared at the messages numb. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in like water through cracked concrete until you realize you're standing in ruins. By the end of the week, I went back to the apartment, not because I forgave him, but because I needed to collect my things. When I walked in, everything was as I'd left it, the same faint scent of his cologne, the same framed picture of us at the lake. But something was missing. Trust, warmth, safety. Elliot met me in the living room, nervous, overeager. "Jane, can we please talk?" About what I said, keeping my voice level. "That night, it wasn't what you think. Rachel was upset about her breakup. She came over for advice. You just misunderstood." I almost laughed. "Do you always comfort crying friends with your hand in their hair?" He flushed. "You're twisting it. You know Rachel. She's affectionate. You're reading into something that isn't there." I looked at him, really looked. His eyes darted away. His jaw clenched a little too hard. "You're lying," I said softly. He took a step toward me. "No, I'm trying to fix this. You're making it impossible." I didn't answer. I just walked past him into the bedroom and started folding my clothes. He stood in the doorway watching. "You're not even going to fight for us." I stopped, my hands still. Why do women always have to fight for something a man already killed? He didn't have an answer. For a while after that, I tried pretending life was normal. We didn't break up, not officially. We just stopped talking. We still lived together, but the air was heavy. He'd leave early, come home late. His phone was always face down. When he did speak, it was in clipped, polite sentences like two strangers sharing a bus ride. Rachel, meanwhile, had become a ghost. She didn't call or text. Mutual friends said she was giving me space. I didn't know if I should laugh or cry. At first, I convinced myself that maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I'd let insecurity ruin something good. I even apologized to him one night after a few glasses of wine. He smiled faintly and said, "It's okay. I know you can be emotional." That word, it slithered under my skin like poison. A week later, I found Rachel's scarf in our laundry basket. Pale pink, the one I'd helped her pick out last Christmas. I held it up, feeling my stomach twist. "Elliot." He walked out of the bathroom, towel around his waist. "Yeah. Why is this here?" I asked. He glanced at it, shrugged. "She came by a few days ago. Must have left it." "She came here." He nodded too casually. "Yeah, she wanted to borrow my old camera. You know, for her photography class." "Funny," I said, "because she dropped that class 2 months ago." His jaw tightened. "Are you checking up on her now?" "No," I said quietly. "I just listen." We stood there in silence, the scarf dangling between us like evidence neither of us wanted to acknowledge. He sighed. "Jane, you're spiraling again. You need to relax. Not everything's a conspiracy." "I'm not spiraling," I said. "I'm connecting dots you keep trying to erase." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration flaring. "You always have to make everything dramatic." "I always have to notice when something's wrong," I corrected. For a moment, his expression softened, guilt flickered across his face, but it vanished just as fast. He stepped closer, voice lowering. "You're pushing me away." I looked up at him. "No, Elliot. You already left. You just haven't packed yet." That night, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the reflection of the city lights on the window. I thought about the way Rachel used to tease me for being too logical, how Elliot once said she was so easy to talk to. I remembered the way she looked at him at our last dinner together, too long, too open. I remembered how he smiled back when he thought I wasn't watching. It had all been there. The clues. The small betrayals disguised as coincidences. Maybe I didn't want to see it. Maybe love makes you blind because it hurts too much to see clearly. I went to bed that night with my eyes open. I heard Elliot come in, hours later smelled Rachel's perfume on his jacket and said nothing. Because silence, I was starting to realize, isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just the sound of everything falling apart. The truth didn't explode into my life. It leaked in slow and sour until the air around me tasted like rust. 3 weeks after I found Rachel's scarf, I came home late from work. The apartment was too quiet. No TV, no music, just the faint hum of the refrigerator. Elliot was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone, his face unreadable. "Hey," I said, setting my bag down. He looked up. "We need to talk." That sentence, the one everyone dreads, landed like a knife in my stomach. I didn't answer. I just waited. He stood pacing once before blurting out, "You were right." My breath caught. About what? He hesitated, then sighed. About Rachel. I didn't move. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire ready to snap. "How long?" I finally asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Does it matter?" "Humor me." 3 months, he said, not meeting my eyes. But emotionally, probably longer. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. Emotionally longer. That's poetic. "Jane, I didn't mean for it to happen." "They never do." He started talking faster, words tumbling over themselves. "It wasn't planned, okay? We just got close. You were always so busy, so focused on work. Rachel? She listened. She understood me. I felt my pulse in my ears. She understood you. He nodded weakly. She gets me in ways you don't anymore. With you, everything's so serious. With her, it feels easy. Something inside me broke quietly, cleanly. Not like a crash, more like a breath leaving my body and not coming back. Easy, I repeated, my voice flat. You cheated on me because she was easy. He frowned. That's not what I said. But that's what you meant. The doorbell rang. He froze. I stared at him. Let me guess, I said. Rachel. He opened the door before I could stop him. There she was, standing in the hallway, clutching her purse like a shield. Her eyes darted between us. Did you tell her? I stepped forward. He did. Rachel's face crumpled. Jane, please, I never wanted to hurt you. Then why did you? She flinched. I don't know. It just happened. You know how much I care about you. You're my best friend. Best friends don't sleep with each other's boyfriends. Tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't just about sex. We love each other. We love each other, I repeated slowly, as if testing the words on my tongue. That's cute. Did you rehearse that line together? Elliot stepped closer. Jane, please stop. Why I turned to him, afraid of how it sounds out loud. Rachel reached for my hand. I didn't mean to steal him. I pulled my hand away. You can't steal what wants to be taken. She started crying, but the sound barely registered. I was too busy memorizing the moment, the exact second, when everything I believed about love disintegrated. 4 years of trust, laughter, plans for a home and a future gone, replaced by the hollow truth that neither of them had the courage to face until it was too late. I looked at Elliot. You know, I used to think heartbreak would feel like fire, but this feels like drowning. He whispered, I'm sorry. No, I said softly. You're guilty. That's not the same thing. I packed that night while they sat in the living room, whispering to each other. I didn't shout. I didn't slam doors. I just folded my life into a suitcase. When I reached the door, Elliot stood. Where are you going? Somewhere I can breathe. He moved toward me. You don't have to do this. Yes, I said I do. Rachel rose, wiping her eyes. Jane, please, can we at least talk? I looked at her one last time. You already said enough. Then I walked out. The elevator ride down was silent, except for the sound of my heartbeat. I didn't cry until I reached the parking lot, not because I wanted him back, but because I finally realized how long I'd been living in denial. Later that night, I sat in my car at a red light, my suitcase on the seat beside me. The city glowed around me, indifferent. And for the first time in years, I had nowhere to go, and no one waiting for me. But somehow the emptiness felt cleaner than the lies. I didn't block his number right away. For the first week, I just ignored it. His texts came in bursts, first guilt, then pleading, then anger, then silence. Each new message chipped away at the person he wanted me to keep. Being forgiving, understanding, naive. I moved into a short-term rental, a bare, echoing apartment with white walls and no memories. The first night I slept there, I realized something strange. I didn't miss him. I missed who I thought he was. There's a difference. The next morning, I went for a walk through the park. The air was cold, the kind that wakes you up from the inside. I passed a couple holding hands, laughing. A month ago, that sight would have gutted me. But now I just felt nothing. That nothing was peace. 3 weeks passed. People noticed my disappearance. Mara, one of our mutual friends, cornered me at a coffee shop. You're seriously not talking to him? She asked, incredulous. No, I said simply. She frowned. Jane, come on. He made a mistake. Everyone does. I stirred my coffee slowly. A mistake is spilling coffee on someone's rug. What he did was a decision. Mara rolled her eyes. You're really cold, you know that? I smiled faintly. No, I'm healing. That was the end of that conversation. I deleted my social media next, not out of shame, but because I didn't want to perform my pain. I didn't need to prove to anyone that I was doing fine. I just wanted to be fine. I started therapy, signed up for yoga, took weekend hikes by myself. I cooked for one and found that silence at dinner didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. Meanwhile, the updates kept finding me through others. Elliot had quit his job at the agency. Rachel was posting vague quotes about karma and losing yourself to love. I didn't care, but I read them anyway, as if studying a language I'd once spoken fluently, but now forgot. My therapist, a calm woman with gray hair and kind eyes, asked me once, "What do you want from all this, Jane?" I thought for a long moment before answering. Nothing. That's the point. She smiled. Then you're finally learning detachment. The hardest kind of revenge. One afternoon, I ran into Elliot's sister at the farmer's market. She looked surprised, almost relieved to see me. "Jane, I've been meaning to reach out," she said. He's not doing great." I picked up an apple, inspecting it. "That's unfortunate." Her face fell. "He made a mistake. He knows it. He misses you." "I'm sure he does," I said, setting the apple back down. "But he didn't miss me when I was still there." She sighed. "You used to love him." "I used to be loved by him too. At least I thought so." Her voice softened. "He's miserable, Jane. Don't you care?" I met her eyes. I care about the woman who finally stopped waiting for his misery to make her happy. She didn't know what to say after that. Nights were the hardest at first. Not because I missed him, but because I was relearning how to live without measuring my day around someone else's mood. I'd hear echoes of our old life, sometimes the sound of his laughter in my head, the way his toothbrush used to sit next to mine, the faint scent of his cologne when I unpacked something he'd once touched. But those memories faded slowly like photographs left in the sun. One evening, I lit a candle, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat by the window watching the city. I thought about Rachel. I wondered if she looked at him the same way I once did, believing love could excuse everything. Then I realized I didn't want to know. Some stories don't need sequels. That night I wrote in my journal, "Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy." When you disappear from the people who broke you, they're forced to face the echo of their own actions. By the time I closed the notebook, I felt lighter. It turns out absence can be the sharpest form of revenge, not because it punishes them, but because it frees you. They mistook my healing for heartlessness. They never understood that I had to become cold, just to stop bleeding. It started with a text I shouldn't have opened. "Hey, can we talk?" No name, but I didn't need one. I knew that number by heart once. Elliot. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. The same man who told me I was too emotional was now sending midnight messages like a confession. I deleted it without replying. 2 days later, another message appeared. "I just want closure." Closure. The word people use when what they really want is forgiveness they don't deserve. I didn't answer that one either. Weeks passed. Life felt steady, almost peaceful again. I got promoted at work, started teaching a part-time design course, and joined a weekend hiking group. That's where I met Noah, a history teacher with warm eyes and the kind of patience that makes you forget the world once demanded your constant apology. We weren't dating yet, just talking. Slowly, gently. He never pushed, never rushed. It felt like stepping barefoot onto soft grass after years of walking on glass. For the first time, I felt safe, and then the ghost came back. I was leaving the gym one evening when I noticed a car idling by the curb, a familiar silhouette behind the wheel. Elliot. I almost laughed. He looked smaller, somehow tired, unshaven eyes, heavy. He got out quickly when he saw me. "Jane, wait," he called. I didn't stop walking. "Please, I just need 5 minutes." I turned to him, keeping my tone calm. "Why are you here?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need to explain. Rachel, she's gone. She left me." I blinked slowly. "And I'm supposed to care because—" His jaw tightened. "She used me, Jane. It was never real. She made me think." "She made you," I interrupted, voice sharp. "No one makes you betray someone. That was all you." He took a step closer, eyes glassy. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I see that now." I exhaled softly. "Funny. I told you that once, and you laughed." He flinched. "I was stupid. I thought I wanted excitement. I thought she—" "You thought wrong," I said. "And now you're realizing that love doesn't feel like adrenaline. It feels like peace. And you threw yours away." He stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for the softness I used to give him. But it wasn't there anymore. I turned to leave. His voice broke behind me. "Can't you at least talk to me?" "No," I said without looking back. "Because I don't negotiate with my past." A week later, I saw her. I was mid-workout at the gym when I caught sight of Rachel by the entrance. She looked hollow. Her once glossy hair hung limp, her clothes too big, her face pale. The kind of tired that lives in the bones. She spotted me and froze. Then she walked over slow and hesitant. "Jane," she whispered, voice trembling. "Please, can we talk?" I lowered my headphones. "About what?" Tears filled her eyes. "About everything. I know you hate me. You have every right to. But I'm so sorry. Elliot, he used me. He made me feel like we were meant to be, but it was all lies. He never loved me like he loved you." I looked at her, really looked. The woman who once laughed in my kitchen, who swore she'd never hurt me now, stood shaking, broken and desperate for absolution. "That's unfortunate," I said quietly. She blinked. That's all you have to say. Yes, I replied, because what you're feeling now, betrayal, confusion, pain, that's what you handed me months ago. You just never imagined being on the other end of it. She wiped her cheeks, voice cracking. I thought he was different. You thought wrong, I said gently. We both did. Her shoulders collapsed inward. Can you ever forgive me? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about deciding it doesn't control me anymore. So yes, Rachel, I forgive you, but I don't want you in my life. The words seemed to stun her more than anger would have. She nodded weakly, whispering, I understand. Then she turned and walked away, leaving a faint trail of perfume and regret behind her. When I left the gym that night, the air felt lighter. The past had finally stopped following me. No angry texts, no unexpected calls, no desperate apologies could change what was already over. That night, I sat by my window again, the city lights flickering like old memories refusing to die. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, once upon a time I would have traded my peace for their apology, but peace doesn't need an audience. And for the first time in years, I meant it. 3 months after that night at the gym, I realized I hadn't thought about Elliot or Rachel in weeks. Not really. Their faces had become foggy outlines, familiar but distant, like characters from a story I'd outgrown. One morning, I got a message from Mara again. He's seeing someone new. Just thought you should know. I smiled to myself, sipping my coffee. Of course he is, I whispered. Men like Elliot never sit in the wreckage they create. They just move their furniture to someone else's house. By then, my life had changed shape entirely. Work was thriving. My students adored me. And Noah, the quiet, patient man I met on the trail, had become something real. He didn't make grand promises. He just showed up, with honesty, with consistency. He listened to me, not to fix me, but to understand. One evening, we were sitting on my balcony, the city humming below us. He handed me a cup of tea and asked, Do you ever miss him? I thought about it for a moment, the night breeze brushing my hair. No, I said. I miss who I thought he was. But the real him, no. Noah nodded softly. That's the difference between nostalgia and healing. I smiled. You sound like my therapist. He laughed. She sounds smart. We sat in silence for a while, watching the city lights blur into stars. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Elliot. I didn't open it right away. I set it on my kitchen counter and stared at it for hours. Part of me wanted to know what he could possibly say now. The other part already knew. Eventually, curiosity won. Jane. I've spent months trying to find the right words, but nothing feels enough. You were my home, and I destroyed it. Rachel's gone. She left me for someone else, and I deserve that. But losing you, that's the part I can't live with. You were everything good in me. I see that now. I don't expect forgiveness, but if you ever think about what we had, please know I'd do anything to undo what I did. Elliot. I read it once, then again. Then I folded it carefully, walked to the trash, and dropped it in without hesitation. Because I didn't need his guilt anymore. I didn't need his acknowledgement to validate my pain. I had already built something better from the ruins he left behind. That night, Noah found me sitting quietly on the couch. Rough day, he asked. I shook my head. Actually, freeing. He smiled. That's my favorite kind of day. He reached for my hand, and I let him. The warmth of it felt steady, real, not performative. And for the first time, I realized how much energy I'd spent loving people who never learned how to hold love without breaking it. I leaned back against him, my voice barely above a whisper. You know what's funny? I used to think closure came from them saying sorry, but it doesn't. What does it come from? He asked. From finally understanding I don't need to hear their voice to stop feeling their absence. A few weeks later, I got another text, an unknown number again. I saw your pictures with him. You look happy. I'm glad. Elliot, again. This time I didn't delete it right away. I looked at it for a long moment, then smiled. He was right. I was happy, and he had nothing to do with that happiness. So I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I just let the message sit there like a reminder that healing isn't silence. It's indifference. Sometimes people ask if I ever forgave them. The truth is, forgiveness was never about letting them back in. It was about accepting that they showed me exactly who they were and believing them the first time. Elliot and Rachel thought they ruined me, but really they built the woman I was always meant to become. Because heartbreak didn't destroy me, it introduced me to myself. They became lessons I didn't ask for but learned anyway.